The first chapter is titled Communicating with Yourself, and it explains why it is important to be mindful of our own thoughts, feelings, and emotions before we can communicate effectively with others. The author argues that communication is not just about exchanging words, but also about creating understanding and connection. He says that, without understanding, we can't love. The author suggests that we often neglect to listen to ourselves and pay attention to what is going on inside us. He says that many of us spend a lot of time in meetings or emailing with others, and not enough time communicating with ourselves. He warns that this can lead to stress, confusion, and unhappiness. He advises us to practice mindfulness, which is the art of being aware of the present moment, and to use breathing techniques to calm our mind and body. He says that mindful breathing helps us recognize and embrace our feelings. The author also emphasizes the importance of self-compassion and self-care. He says that, to communicate with others, we must first communicate with ourselves. He encourages us to speak kindly to ourselves and to treat ourselves with respect and dignity. He says that when you are able to communicate lovingly with yourself, you will have more understanding and harmony with others. The author concludes the chapter by inviting us to practice mindful communication with ourselves every day. He says that the quality of your communication with yourself determines the quality of your communication with the world. He assures us that by doing so, we will be able to communicate more authentically, compassionately, and effectively with others. He says that the art of communicating is the art of living. Chapter 2 is titled The 6 Mantras of Loving Speech, and it introduces 6 simple phrases that can express our love and appreciation for others. The author explains that these mantras are not just words, but also actions that show our presence, attention, and care. He says that when you love someone, the best thing you can offer is your presence. The 6 mantras are: I am here for you. I know you are there, and I am very happy. I know you suffer, and that is why I am here for you. I suffer, please help. This is a happy moment. You are partly right. The author illustrates how to use these mantras in different situations, such as when someone is in pain, when we are in conflict, or when we want to celebrate a joyful moment. He says that these mantras can be practiced in our daily life, and they can bring a lot of happiness and peace to ourselves and to those we love. Chapter 3 is titled Listening Deeply for Understanding, and it teaches us how to listen with compassion and empathy to the suffering of others. The author argues that listening is a powerful way to help others heal and transform their pain. He says that deep listening is the kind of listening that helps us to keep compassion alive while the other speaks, which may be for half an hour or 45 minutes. The author suggests that we practice mindful breathing and maintain a calm and open attitude when we listen to others. He says that we have to be aware that listening like this has only one purpose: to give the other person a chance to express himself and find relief from his suffering. He warns us to avoid interrupting, judging, or reacting to what the other person says, and instead focus on understanding and empathizing with their feelings and needs. The author also emphasizes the importance of listening to ourselves and our own suffering. He says that we have to listen to our own suffering and the suffering of our own people, our own nation. He encourages us to use the mantra, I suffer, please help, to ask for support and guidance from others when we are in distress. Chapter 4 is titled Loving Speech, and it teaches us how to use words that are kind, truthful, and helpful to others. The author argues that loving speech is a way of expressing our love and appreciation for others, as well as a way of resolving conflicts and misunderstandings. He says that loving speech is the kind of speech that can make people happy. The author suggests that we practice loving speech by following 4 principles. 1. Say only what is true and beneficial. 2. Do not exaggerate or embellish the facts. 3. Do not speak with a hidden agenda or ulterior motive. 4. Do not speak out of anger or hatred. The author also emphasizes the importance of apologizing and forgiving when we have hurt someone with our words. He says that apologizing is a very deep practice. You have to be very awake and aware to do it. He encourages us to use the mantra, "I am sorry, please forgive me," to express our sincere regret and ask for forgiveness. Chapter 5 is titled Compassionate Listening, and it teaches us how to listen with an open heart and mind to the suffering of others. The author argues that compassionate listening is a way of helping others heal and transform their pain. He says that compassionate listening is the kind of listening that helps us to keep compassion alive while the other speaks, which may be for half an hour or 45 minutes. The author suggests that we practice compassionate listening by following 4 guidelines. Listen with the sole intention of helping the other person to suffer less. Do not judge, criticize, or interrupt the other person. Do not try to offer solutions or advice unless asked. Acknowledge the other person's feelings and needs. The author also emphasizes the importance of listening to ourselves and our own suffering. He says that we have to listen to our own suffering and the suffering of our own people, our own nation. He encourages us to use the mantra, "I suffer, please help," to ask for support and guidance from others when we are in distress. Chapter 6 is titled, The 4 Elements of True Presence, and it explains how to cultivate a mindful and authentic presence in our communication with others. The author argues that presence is the foundation of communication and that we need to be fully aware of ourselves and the other person in order to communicate effectively. He says that without presence, there is no communication. The author suggests that we practice the 4 elements of true presence, which are intention. This is the motivation and purpose behind our communication. We need to have a clear and positive intention to help the other person and ourselves, and to avoid any hidden agenda or ulterior motive. Attention. This is the focus and concentration we give to the other person and ourselves. We need to pay attention to what the other person is saying and feeling, as well as to our own thoughts and emotions, and to avoid any distractions or interruptions. Inclusion. This is the sense of connection and belonging we create with the other person and ourselves. We need to include the other person in our awareness and compassion, and to avoid any separation or discrimination. Innovation. This is the creativity and flexibility we bring to the communication. We need to be open to new ideas and perspectives, and to avoid any rigidity or dogmatism. The author illustrates how to use these 4 elements in different situations, such as when we are angry, when we are in a meeting, or when we are in a relationship. He says that these 4 elements can help us communicate with anyone, even those who are very different from us. Chapter 7 is titled, The 6 Principles of Conciliation, and it teaches us how to resolve conflicts and restore harmony with others. The author argues that conciliation is the art of reconciling and healing the wounds caused by misunderstanding and violence. He says that conciliation is the way to end war and bring peace. The author suggests that we practice the 6 principles of conciliation, which are: don't wait. This means that we should not delay or postpone the communication when there is a conflict. We should take the initiative and reach out to the other person as soon as possible, and to avoid any resentment or bitterness. Sympathize with the other's perception. This means that we should try to understand and empathize with the other person's point of view and feelings. We should acknowledge their suffering and their needs, and to avoid any blame or criticism. Accept and acknowledge the other's feelings. This means that we should accept and validate the other person's emotions, even if they are negative or unpleasant. We should not judge, suppress, or deny their feelings, and to avoid any defensiveness or hostility. Express regret. This means that we should express our sincere regret and apology for any harm or hurt we have caused to the other person. We should not make excuses, justify, or rationalize our actions, and to avoid any pride or arrogance. Explain the situation. This means that we should explain our own perspective and situation without blaming or accusing the other person. We should share our own feelings and needs, and to avoid any exaggeration or distortion. Propose a concrete solution. This means that we should propose a specific and realistic solution that can address the problem and satisfy both parties. We should not impose, demand, or manipulate the other person, and to avoid any vagueness or ambiguity. Chapter 8 is titled, The Practice of Loving Speech and Deep Listening, and it introduces the practice of loving speech and deep listening as a way to cultivate compassion and understanding in our communication. Loving speech involves speaking with kindness, honesty, and respect. Deep listening involves listening with the sole intention of helping the other person to suffer less. The author says that loving speech and deep listening are the best instruments for establishing peace. The author suggests that we practice loving speech and deep listening by following 4 steps. Prepare yourself. This means that we should calm our mind and body before we communicate. We should practice mindful breathing and generate a feeling of goodwill and compassion for ourselves and the other person. Express yourself. This means that we should speak from our heart and express our true feelings and needs. We should use I statements and avoid blaming or accusing the other person. We should also use positive language and avoid negative words. Listen deeply. This means that we should listen with full attention and empathy to the other person. We should not interrupt, judge, or react to what the other person says. We should also acknowledge their feelings and needs and ask open-ended questions to clarify and understand them better. Follow up. This means that we should check if the communication was successful and if there is anything else we need to do. We should also express our gratitude and appreciation for the other person and their willingness to communicate with us. The author illustrates how to use these steps in different situations, such as when we are angry, when we are in a conflict, or when we are in a relationship. He says that these steps can help us communicate with anyone, even those who are very difficult or hostile. Chapter 9 is titled, The 5 Mindfulness Trainings, and it explains how to apply the principles of mindful communication to our daily life. The author argues that the 5 mindfulness trainings are a concrete way to practice the art of communicating and to transform ourselves and the world. He says that the 5 mindfulness trainings are the foundation of a happy and peaceful life. The 5 mindfulness trainings are 1. Reverence for life. This means that we respect and protect all forms of life and that we avoid harming or killing any living being. We also practice compassion and generosity towards ourselves and others, and we avoid exploiting or oppressing anyone. 2. True happiness. This means that we practice gratitude and contentment, and that we avoid greed and attachment. We also practice generosity and sharing, and we avoid stealing or taking what is not ours. 3. True love. This means that we practice loving kindness and responsibility, and that we avoid sexual misconduct and harm. We also practice fidelity and respect, and we avoid betraying or hurting anyone. Loving speech and deep. 4. Listening. This means that we practice the art of communicating as described in Chapter 8, and that we avoid lying or harming anyone with our words. We also practice reconciliation and forgiveness, and we avoid anger or hatred. 5. Nourishment and healing. This means that we practice mindful consumption and moderation, and that we avoid intoxicants or substances that harm our body and mind. We also practice mindful eating and living, and we avoid wasting or polluting our environment. The author concludes the book by inviting us to practice the 5 mindfulness trainings with ourselves and others every day. He says that the 5 mindfulness trainings are a gift we can offer to ourselves, to our loved ones, and to the world. He assures us that by doing so, we will be able to communicate more authentically, compassionately, and effectively with others. Thank you for listening.